The city of Gullhaven doesn't just sit by the sea, it slowly drowns in it. The fog rolls in off the Atlantic every morning, thick as wet wool, smelling of salt, diesel, and decay. It clings to the brickwork, making the sidewalks slick and the neon signs bleed into the gray air. I'm 24 years old, and I'm good at being quiet. It's a skill you learn when you'd rather not be noticed. My last job, waiting tables at Sal's diner, vanished overnight. They shut the place down on a Tuesday. Sal said it was a bogus safety violation. I knew what that meant. Sal hadn't paid the right people. And in Gullhaven, if you don't pay, you don't exist, which left me in the same boat. I had rent due, and my stomach had been empty for the better part of 2 days. So I took the only job my temp agency offered hourly Maid. The location was Black Reef House. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress. A monument of black stone and tinted glass perched on the cliffs overlooking the sound. Like a predator watching the ships slide into Sable Harbor. It was isolated, surrounded by a 10-foot iron fence and more security cameras than a casino. My phone, an old model with a spiderweb crack across the screen, vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. Habit, I don't use it for calls. I use the camera. I'd been in photography school once, about 100 years ago, back when I thought capturing light was a form of art. Now, I just take pictures to remember the truth. The way the rust ate a chain-link fence. The pattern of a coffee stain on a counter. Little, insignificant details that proved I was here, that the world was real, even when it felt like a dream I couldn't wake up from. I snapped a quick, blurry shot of the gate's locking mechanism. Evidence. The other maids, mostly older women from the city, moved with a silent, practiced efficiency. They taught me the rules on my first day, in whispers. 1, you don't speak unless spoken to. 2, you don't look anyone in the eye. 3, you never, ever go to the North Tower unless summoned. The owner lived there. I hadn't seen the owner. In 2 weeks of scrubbing floors and polishing glass, I hadn't seen him once, just the hushed stories. His name was Gustavo Serrano, 32 years old, according to the cryptic agency file. The whispers said he was the head of the Obsidian Circle. They said he owned Sable Harbor, every crane, every container, every union man who worked the docks. They said he was dangerous, but he was quiet about it. I was assigned to the main conference room today. It was a vast, cold space dominated by a single table that looked like it had been carved from a block of polished night. It was so black it seemed to drink the light from the ceiling to floor windows. Someone had been careless. A white, puckered burn mark, the ghost of a hot dish, stained the perfect finish right at the head of the table. I was on my knees, trying to lift the stain with a plastic scraper and a special polish. My breath fogged on the cold surface. The overhead lights reflected off the tiny scratches I was making, turning my failure into a constellation of little moons. You're missing a spot. The voice was low, smooth, like fine gravel wrapped in velvet. I jolted, the plastic scraper clattering against the stone. I hadn't heard him enter. The marble floor hadn't whispered a single warning. I froze, my gaze traveling up, polished black shoes, expensive, shined to a mirror finish, the perfect sharp crease of black trousers, a black suit jacket, tailored so precisely it looked more like armor than clothing. Gustavo Serrano? I scrambled to my feet, my cheeks burning hot. I wiped my damp hands on my gray apron. Mr. Serrano, I'm sorry, I was just the stain is... He ignored my fumbling. He walked toward the table, moving with a fluid grace that was almost unnerving. He stopped and pointed one long, unadorned finger at the mark. There. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence of the room like a razor. A halo of grime. You're scraping, not cleaning. He reached into the breast pocket of his suit and pulled out a handkerchief. Not paper, bright white linen, so crisp it looked sharp. He tossed it onto the table. It landed without a sound. In the corner, a single letter S was embroidered in silver thread. Do it again, he said. It wasn't a request. I picked up the handkerchief. The fabric was impossibly soft, thicker than any I'd ever held. I knelt, my shame battling my fear. I started rubbing the spot, the pressure of his presence a physical weight on my back. "Look at me." I stopped. My blood ran cold. This was the test. In my world, the one I'd escaped. You never made eye contact. Eye contact was a challenge or an invitation. Both got you hurt. I prefer to know who is scrubbing my furniture. Miss Solis. He knew my name. Slowly, I lifted my head. I pushed the stray hair from my face and met his gaze. His eyes were the color of the harbor at midnight. Not black, but a deep, dark brown. So dark they reflected the cold light from the window. He wasn't just looking at me. He was reading me. His face was sharp, angular, handsome in a way that was more intimidating than attractive. And his expression, it was one of absolute, chilling calm. The shadow of a smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's better. He let the silence stretch, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant cry of a gull. Finally, he gestured, not at the table, but at the massive chandelier above it, a monstrosity of black iron and crystal teardrops. That fixture is next. It gathers dust. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I was grateful to be dismissed. Though I wasn't, I moved to my utility cart and grabbed the long-handled duster. The ceiling was high, easily 15 feet. I reached up, high. The stretch pulled the cheap cotton of my uniform taut across my shoulders. The sleeve of the gray work shirt I wore under my apron was stiff, starched one too many times. As I stretched for the highest crystal, the sleeve slid down. It only slid an inch, maybe two, just past the knob of my wrist, but in a room where the only sound was the thudding of my own heart. It was a seismic event. The cold morning light from the window hit my inner arm. It illuminated the geography of my past. The scars. They aren't the rough, angry marks of a moment's despair. They are fine, pale, and precise. A pattern. Orderly and systematic. Thin as guitar strings, and just as taut. A story written in a language no one here was supposed to understand. A history of organized, methodical violence. My breath hitched. I yanked the sleeve down, the duster clattering against the chandelier. The crystals chimed, a sound like breaking ice. I braced myself. I waited for the recoil, the disgust, the pity. I waited for the questions. What happened to you? Who did this? Are you unstable? The questions that would mean I was fired. Gustavo Serrano didn't move. His eyes flicked from my wrist back to my face. His expression didn't change, not by a single twitch of a muscle. No pity, no surprise, no revulsion. Just acknowledgement. He didn't ask who. He didn't ask why. He simply tilted his head, as if listening to a sound I couldn't hear. "You have a choice, Miss Solis," he said, his voice dropping even lower, forcing me to lean in just to hear him. "A choice, sir. 1. He held up a finger. "You continue your current schedule. 4 hours a day. You clean what you are assigned. You leave. You are paid your hourly wage, and we never speak of this again." He paused, then held up a second finger. Or 2. You move into the North Tower. Effective immediately. A private suite is available. I stared at him. This made no sense. "Move in, sir. I'm an hourly." "Your compensation would be doubled," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "Your duties would change. You would be assigned exclusively to my private wing. But there are conditions." "Conditions," I repeated, my voice flat. "Silence. You will see things and hear things. You will not repeat them. Punctuality, absolute, and..." He looked me up and down, a slow appraisal that had nothing to do with desire and everything to do with inventory. "You will eat every meal provided. You look like you haven't had a solid meal in a week." It was true. My paycheck from Sal's had bounced, but hearing him say it so calmly felt like another violation. "Mr. Serrano," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, professional. "I appreciate the offer. It's very generous, but I prefer my current arrangement. I have an apartment." A lie. I had a room in Kestrel Heights, with a shared bath and a window that didn't lock. I like my privacy, I finished lamely. His lips twitched. That shadow of a smile returned, cold and knowing, as you wish. He started to walk out. He passed me, and the scent of expensive wool and something clean, like ozone before a storm, washed over me. He stopped at the door, his hand on the massive brass knob. A detail, Miss Solis. He turned his head, looking at me over his shoulder. That midnight gaze pinned me to the floor. The Vesper team was very thorough. Vesper, sir? My internal security. They ran your background before your first day. Standard procedure. He let the words hang in the air. They noted your record was clean. Remarkably so, for someone from Kestrel Heights. But they also noted a significant weight loss in the last 6 months, and the withdrawal from Gullhaven City College. Photography. Wasn't it? The air left my lungs in a silent rush. He knew. He hadn't just seen the scars and reacted. He knew before he walked into this room. The job offer, the conditions. The specific mention of eating it wasn't an impulse. It was a calculated move. Someone had already dug into my life, cracked open my past, and laid it bare on his obsidian table. Finish the table, he said, his voice flat again. Use the handkerchief. It won't scratch the finish. And then he was gone, as silently as he arrived. I worked for another 2 hours, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the duster. The bus ride back to Kestrel Heights felt longer than usual. The Heights was a cruel joke. It was the lowest lying part of the city, a basin of crumbling brick tenements that smelled of low tide and stale beer. My room was on the 3rd floor. I double-locked the door, which was mostly cosmetic, and wedged my only chair under the knob. The window was cracked, a strip of gray duct tape holding the glass together against the wind. The feeling of being watched, which had been a low-grade hum under my skin for the past year, was now a pounding drum. It had followed me from Black Reef House. It was in the room with me. I sat on my lumpy mattress. Through the paper-thin walls, I could hear my neighbor's television, turned up too loud, a local news anchor, reading a script about another disappearance at Sable Harbor, a dock worker, vanished without a trace. The anchor chirped, her voice too bright. I knew who owned Sable Harbor. I stood and went to the small, mildew-spotted mirror hanging on the back of the door. I stared at my reflection. Aria Solis, 24, eyes too big for a face that had gotten too thin. I made a promise to the girl in the mirror, the same one I made every night. I will not let the past catch me. I survived. I got out. I am not going back. I am not that person anymore. But as I looked into my own eyes, another image superimposed itself. The reflection of a man in a black suit, standing in a dark room, his face a mask of cold control. The shadow of Gustavo Serrano was already there, imprinted on my reflection. The game had started, and I didn't even know the rules. I refused the job. I walked out of that conference room, my head held high, and took the bus back to Kestrel Heights. I told myself I'd quit. I'd find another diner, another retail job. I wouldn't be bought. But when I showed up at Black Reef House the next morning, braced for a confrontation, nothing happened. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Petrov, a woman built like a filing cabinet, just handed me the daily roster. My name had been moved. North Tower, she grunted, not looking up from her clipboard. You're off the main house rotation. Mr. Serrano requires a dedicated cleaner for his wing. Schedule is 9 to 1, don't be late. My refusal hadn't mattered. The offer hadn't been a choice. It was a notification. Gustavo Serrano was pulling the leash, just to see if I'd choke. The North Tower was different from the rest of the house. The air was warmer, the carpets thicker, the silence heavier. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a command center, the air humming with a low-level electronic buzz. My flimsy utility cart squeaked on the polished hardwood floors, and I winced at the noise. Mrs. Petrov's note was clipped to the handle Priority Tessera Room, deep clean. I'd never heard of the Tessera Room. It was at the end of a long, windowless hallway, a single door of dark, unpolished wood that seemed to absorb the light. The key in my hand was heavy, old-fashioned brass, not a plastic keycard. It felt cold. I pushed the door open. The room wasn't a bedroom. It was an office, or maybe a war room. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, floor to ceiling, offering a godlike view of the gray, churning Atlantic and the skeletal cranes of Sable Harbor below. The other walls were lined with dark, imposing bookshelves. But the centerpiece, the thing that drew my eye, was the map. It was a massive maritime shipping chart, mounted on cork, covering half a wall. Gullhaven Harbor was the nexus, with routes spreading out like a spider's web. Dozens of pins were pushed into it, marking locations. Most were black, the color of obsidian. But there was another cluster. Off the coast, sitting right on the deep water shipping lanes, was a tight nest of pins, bright and venomous blue. My job was to dust, but the map held me captive. I stepped closer, my cloth forgotten in my hand. A small, square piece of paper was pinned near the blue cluster. The handwriting on it was sharp, aggressive, written with a thick black pen. Cobalt serpents. And underneath that, 2 words, partner or rival. My hand went to my pocket, the reflex faster than thought. I pulled out my old phone, the one with the cracked screen. The camera was slow to focus. Click, a photo of the map, evidence, proof of something. I turned to the bookshelves. They were filled with heavy, leather-bound volumes. Not novels, Lloyd's Maritime Law, logistics of deep-water cargo, histories of the Atlantic trade routes. I ran my feather duster along the spines, the smell of old paper and leather filling my nose. I'd brought a glass of water on my cart. The polishing chemicals always dried out my throat. I reached for it, but to get a better angle on the top shelf, I set the glass down on a lower one. Thunk! It wasn't a loud noise, but it was a heavy, oiled sound, mechanical. The section of the bookshelf where I'd placed the glass receded by an inch, then popped open. A hidden compartment. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. This is it. This is the moment, the maid in the movie who sees too much. This is where I should turn, run, and never come back. But I was frozen. Inside the small, velvet-lined niche, there wasn't a weapon. There weren't stacks of cash. It was organized, clinical. A small, sterile-looking white box. I lifted the lid. Inside medical-grade burn ointment, foil-wrapped antiseptic swabs, rolls of sterile white gauze bandages. My skin prickled. This was a first aid kit for a very specific kind of injury. Underneath the box was a single manila folder. My name was on the tab, printed in that same sharp black ink, Aria Solis. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It was an employment contract, not with the temp agency. This was a direct contract with a holding company I'd never heard of, Sable Harbor Logistics. It guaranteed a salary that made my stomach flip 4 times what I was making. It listed full health and dental benefits, a housing stipend. And at the bottom, on the signature line, was my name. It was my signature, the precise way I looped my A, the sharp cut of the S. It was perfect. I have never ever seen this document in my life. If you've seen it, you might as well see it all. I gasped, dropping the folder, the contract and a few loose papers scattered across the floor. Gustavo Serrano was leaning against the doorframe, which he'd obviously opened without a sound. He was dressed down, if you could call it that, no suit jacket, just a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong wrists and a plain, expensive-looking watch. He looked casual, which was somehow 1,000 times more terrifying than the suit. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He looked amused. I'm sorry, Mr. Serrano? I stammered, bending to retrieve the forged contract. The shelf I just set my glass down and it just opened. It's a pressure-sensitive lock, he said, his voice calm, conversational. He walked into the room, his presence sucking the air out, triggered by the precise weight of a full 8-ounce glass of water, a very old trick. He gestured at the items that had fallen from the compartment, the gauze, the ointment. I braced myself. The Lapis Shadow Fund, he said, picking up the small white box. He turned it over in his long fingers. A private discretionary fund. It pays for specialized medical care, reconstructive surgery, advanced burn treatments, procedures that standard insurance policies avoid. He looked up from the box, and his dark eyes locked onto mine. It's specifically for victims of organized cruelty, people who've been marked, people who need a new start, but whose past is still visible on their skin. He knew. The realization from yesterday hit me again, but harder. He wasn't guessing. He knew. Your scars, he said, his voice dropping, not unkindly, but with a surgeon's cold precision. They were stitched, professionally. That's not the kind of work you get in a Kestrel Heights free clinic. Who did the work? He wasn't asking who hurt me. He was asking who helped me. My past was a locked box. I had swallowed the key, and here he was, holding a perfect wax impression of it. I stood up straight, letting the contract fall from my fingers. I ignored the question. Mr. Serrano, I don't know what any of this is. I just want to work. I need a fixed schedule. I'm saving money. I'm trying to go back to school. It was the only piece of truth I had left. He studied me for a long, silent moment. The wind howled outside the massive glass wall, a low, mournful sound. He seemed to be weighing my answer against a dozen other facts I didn't know. Finally, he nodded, a short, sharp gesture. Fine, school is a worthy goal. He reached into the pocket of his trousers. He didn't pull out cash. He pulled out a blue and white plastic card. Crown Mart, he said, sliding it onto the polished desk, a grocery store chain, a mid-level one. Not the high-end organic market his kind would use. This has a balance of $500. It will be refilled on the first of every month. I stared at it. It looked obscene sitting on the dark wood. I can't accept this. It's not a gift, Miss Solis, he said, tapping the forged contract on the floor with the toe of his expensive shoe. It's part of the compensation package you already signed. Consider it an advance. He walked past me, stopping at the door. And Aria, he said, using my first name for the first time. Don't starve. It's inefficient. I left Black Reef House that afternoon with the Crown Mart card burning a hole in my pocket. I felt compromised, bought, owned. On the way home, I stopped at the Crown Mart. I bought groceries, real food, a block of cheese, a loaf of whole wheat bread, apples, eggs, a small, sad-looking chicken. The cashier looked at my threadbare coat, then at the pile of food, then back at me, her eyes full of questions I couldn't answer. Back in my room, I was putting the eggs in my rattling mini-fridge when my phone buzzed. A new text, an unknown number. My blood turned to ice. It was a picture of me, taken today. It was a high-angle shot, looking down. I was standing in the Tessera room, in front of the maritime map, my back to the camera. It was taken from outside the window, an impossible angle, unless you were clinging to the cliff face. Below the image, a single line of text. Serrano's prey is always prettiest before being devoured. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the carton of eggs. They splattered on the linoleum. Someone was watching me inside the house. Someone who could get close to the North Tower. The next morning, I found Marta Quill in the staff break room. Marta was different, younger than the others, with sharp eyes and pink-streaked hair, always chewing gum. She managed the staff logistics, which meant she had access to the security feeds to check for housekeeping infractions. Marta, I said, keeping my voice low and casual. This is so stupid, but I think I lost my watch in the North Tower hallway yesterday. Around maybe 10 a.m. She sighed, snapping her gum. Aria, you know we're not supposed to pull feeds for personal. Please, I said, putting a desperate edge in my voice. It was my mother's. A lie. My mother left me with nothing but my name. She rolled her eyes, but the lie worked. Fine, don't make it a habit. She pulled out her tablet and started tapping. She scrolled, tapped again, then she frowned. That's weird. She said, What? My heart jumped. The feed, North Tower, main corridor, yesterday. She turned the tablet to me. The timeline showed the camera feeds, but from 8 a.m. to noon, the file was just a block of gray static. It's corrupted, just static. Vesper must be doing system updates again. She snapped her gum. Sorry, kid. Looks like your watch is gone for good. Corrupted or wiped. Someone knew I was in that room, and someone with high-level access had covered their tracks. That night, the fear followed me home and locked the door with me. It was almost midnight. The tenement was quiet except for the sound of rain lashing against my duct-taped window. I was cleaning the lens of my old photography camera with the hem of my t-shirt when the knock came. Knock, knock, knock. Not loud, but firm, authoritative. I froze. No one knocked on my door. Ever. I slid off the bed, my stockinged feet silent on the floor. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Two men, in the dim, flickering orange light of the hallway. They looked official. They wore cheap, rumpled suits, but the ties were knotted tightly. Ash gray. Miss Aria Solis, one of them called out. His voice was flat, bored, like a man at the end of a long shift. I held my breath. Miss Solis, we're from the Municipal Integrity Commission, the MIC. We just have a few questions about your employer. MIC? The city's internal affairs, the clean cops, the ones who were supposed to police the regular cops, the politicians, the whole rotten system. I slowly unhooked the chain and opened the door, leaving the chair wedged under the knob as a doorstop. The man in front was older, maybe mid-50s, with a face like worn leather and the tiredest eyes I'd ever seen. Sorry to bother you so late, Miss. I'm Investigator Thorne. He held up a badge in a worn leather wallet. It looked real. We're conducting a review of irregularities at Sable Harbor, he said. We understand you're currently employed at Black Reef House. I'm a maid, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The best witnesses are the ones no one notices. The other man, younger and sharper, chimed in. He smiled, but it was all teeth. Thorne shot him a look. We're just asking if you've seen anything unusual. Large deliveries at odd hours, unfamiliar visitors, anything at all. My mind flashed to the map. Cobalt serpents. I just cleaned the floors, I said. Thorne sighed, a sound of deep frustration. Look, miss, we know who Gustavo Serrano is. We're building a case, a strong one, a witness on the inside that's valuable. It could be very helpful to someone looking for a fresh start, maybe a grant to go back to school. The words hit me like a slap. Go back to school. The same bait. He pulled a business card from his pocket and offered it to me. You think about it. You see something, you hear something, you call this number. We can protect you. I took the card. The paper felt cheap, flimsy. The ink was slightly raised. Thank you. Investigators, I'll keep it in mind. I shut the door, slid the chain, and jammed the chair back under the knob. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from something else. We can protect you. No one had ever protected me, not really. I looked at the card. Municipal Integrity Commission, Robert Thorne, Senior Investigator. My gut twisted. Something was wrong. The cheap suit, the flimsy card, the way the younger one smiled, it felt theatrical. Wrong. My instinct, the one that had kept me alive when others weren't, screamed one thing. These men were not clean. I grabbed my phone, click, a photo of the card. Evidence. Then, my fingers closed around the card. I tore it in half, and then in half again. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, watching the gray, rainy light of dawn creep through the duct tape crack in my window. At 6 a.m., I heard a sound in the hallway. Not a knock, a soft thud, the sound of something being set down. I waited a full minute, listening. Nothing. I moved to the door and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. I slowly opened the door. Sitting on my filthy, worn-out doormat was a black bento box, the expensive, lacquered kind. It was still warm to the touch. I looked left. I looked right. At the far end of the hall, by the stairwell, a shadow detached itself from the wall. Gustavo Serrano. He was standing there, in his tailored black suit, looking as out of place in this crumbling tenement as a panther in a dog pound. He must have been waiting. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His words traveled down the empty, damp hallway and hit me like a physical force. "Miss Solis, a piece of advice." He took a single, slow step forward, his hands in his pockets. "Don't open the door for men who wear ash-gray ties. They're rarely who they claim to be." He turned, not waiting for a reply, and disappeared down the stairs, his footsteps making no sound at all. He'd known. He knew they'd come. He knew I was being watched by everyone. And he was watching, too. I took the suite in the North Tower. It wasn't a decision, it was an acknowledgement. Kestrel Heights wasn't safe. The men in the ash-gray ties, the anonymous text, the corrupted camera feed, they were all circling. Gustavo's warning in my hallway wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. My room with the taped-up window was a cage, and he was the only one who had offered a key. This new cage was just much, much bigger. My duties changed. I was no longer just a maid. I was a ghost who served one man. The North Tower kitchen was a sterile expanse of stainless steel and black marble, a place that cared more about precision than comfort. I was polishing a chrome espresso machine when Gustavo entered. I tensed, my shoulders instinctively curling forward. He was in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. He was holding a chef's knife that looked lethally sharp. The air was filled with steam from a boiling pot and the sharp, bright scent of licorice. He walked to the central island, where a bulb of fennel and a cutting board waited. He didn't look at me. Thwip, thwip, thwip! The knife moved with a quiet, hypnotic rhythm, partitioning the vegetable with surgical skill. "You don't like fennel," he stated. It wasn't a question. I jumped, my rag squeaking on the chrome. I don't mind it, sir." "You wrinkled your nose when you walked in," he said, his eyes on the blade. "Your Vesper file is comprehensive. It includes the order slips from Sal's Diner. You prefer savory, salty. You dislike anise. The file also noted you lost 10 pounds in the 2 months before you started here." He stopped chopping. He finally looked at me, his gaze as sharp and cold as the knife in his hand. "You flinch every time I enter a room," he said, his voice low. "You hunch your shoulders, not to protect your face, to protect your ribs. Why?" My breath caught. He saw everything. The scars on my wrist, the ones he'd seen in the conference room, were a distraction. He was looking at the injury I kept hidden. "It's an old habit," I whispered. "The Lapis Fund," he said, setting the knife down, perfectly parallel to the edge of the board. "The one I told you about in the Tessera room. It's thorough. We found the unlicensed clinic where you got your wrist stitched. The doctor, he kept poor records, but he remembered you. He said the work on your wrist was an accident. He said he was hired to remove something." He took a step toward me. I took a step back, hitting the counter. "He said it was on your side," Gustavo finished, his voice soft, relentless. The air in the kitchen was thick and hot. I couldn't breathe. The smell of licorice was suffocating. "It was a place." I forced the words out. They tasted like rust and shame. I was 19. It was called the Sanctuary of New Dawn. They called it a correctional facility, a place for troubled girls. "It wasn't," he stated. "No, it was a cult. They marked us to show we belonged to them, a symbol, tattooed on our ribs, a brand of ownership." My voice went flat, the voice I used to talk about the weather, the voice I used to survive. I got out. I ran for 3 days. I found that clinic. I gave him every dollar I had. He wasn't a surgeon. He was cheap. The removal, it was a mess. I instinctively touched my wrist. He used restraints. I reacted badly to the procedure. He got angry. The scars on my arm, those are from the restraints he used to hold me down. He called them deletion marks. The kitchen was silent. No chopping, no steam, just the low hum of the massive refrigerator. Gustavo was staring at the wall, at a spot just past my shoulder. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the story I'd just told. His left hand, which was resting on the marble island, slowly, almost unconsciously, clenched into a fist. The knuckles went bone white. The The veins on the back of his hand and forearm stood out, stark and blue against his skin. When he finally spoke, his voice was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. It was barely a whisper. It was absolutely calm. It was full of murder. This sanctuary, where is it? It doesn't matter, I said, my voice shaking. It's in the past. I'm out. I'm safe. Where? He repeated. I don't know, somewhere in the hills, upstate. As long as you are in Gullhaven, he interrupted, his voice cutting through my panic. As long as you are under this roof, no one will touch you. Not the imposters from the MIC, not the shadow who sends you photographs, and certainly, his eyes, black as the harbor at midnight, met mine. No ghost from a cult. I will not allow it. The force of his promise, the sheer possessive fury in it, knocked me off balance. It was protective, yes, but it was also suffocating. I am not yours to protect, I choked out, the words sharper than I intended. The fire in his eyes banked, replaced by that cold, assessing calm. No, you are not. If I am to stay here, I said, finding a sudden, desperate strength, I require one thing, not money, not protection. I took a steadying breath. I require the right to refuse, the right to say no, to any physical contact. I expected him to laugh or to counter. He didn't. He simply nodded, as if this was the most logical business term in the world. Granted, what are the rules? I prefer clarity. Rules I hadn't thought that far. Simple. You ask. I nod. If I don't nod, you don't touch me. And he prompted. And if I say stop, you stop, instantly, no questions. I ask, I wait for the nod, he repeated, cementing the pact. You say stop, I stop, agreed. He didn't offer a hand to shake. He understood that would be a violation. He turned and walked to a service closet by the kitchen exit. He pulled out a long, dark coat. It looked like it was made of wool or cashmere, impossibly soft. It was his. This wing of the house has floor-to-ceiling glass, he said, holding it out, not forcing it on me, just offering. The wind off the harbor is cold. Your uniform is thin. He was right, but that wasn't the real reason. This coat was long. The sleeves would cover my wrists completely. It wasn't about the cold. It was about covering the evidence. It was a subtle, unspoken act of defense. I took the coat. The wool was heavy and warm. It smelled faintly of him, that clean, ozone before a storm scent. The next 2 weeks passed in that strange, tense silence. I worked. He worked. We orbited each other. The pact was a new, vibrating wire strung between us. Then, the rumors started downstairs. A party. Not at the house. On a yacht, the Asterian. It's the annual Harbor Summit, Marta Quill told me in the break room, snapping her gum. All the sharks in one tank. The Obsidian Circle is making a move, or stopping one. I was North Tower staff. It had nothing to do with me, until Mrs. Petrov, the head housekeeper, cornered me by the linen closet. Solus, your file says you have floral arrangement experience. At the diner, I clarified, just table settings. Good enough, you're assigned to the Asterian tonight. 7 P.E., logistics bay. You're handling the centerpieces. My stomach turned to ice. It wasn't a request, and I knew, with chilling certainty, that Gustavo had ordered it. He was either putting me in the line of fire or pulling me closer to it. I couldn't decide which was worse. The Asterian was a monument to wealth, a 3-tiered monstrosity of polished teak and gleaming brass. The logistics bay, below deck, was a different world. It was hot, loud, and smelled of diesel fumes and wilting lilies. Chefs were screaming, waiters were running. I was shoved in a corner with 3 buckets of flowers and a roll of wire. I was trying to force a rose into a block of foam when a shadow fell over me. Well, look what we have here. A little mouse, escaped from the trap. The voice was thick, slurred with expensive liquor. I turned. A man in his 50s, paunchy, with a flushed face and a tuxedo that was strained at the buttons. His eyes were small, wet and unsettling. "Excuse me, sir," I said, turning back to the flowers. "I'm working." "Oh, I'm sure you are, he chuckled, stepping into my space. I was backed against the cold steel bulkhead. He smelled of whiskey and an overbearing, musky cologne. Serrano's new acquisition. I heard he was keeping something new in the tower. He blocked my exit, placing a heavy hand on the wall by my head. I just want a closer look. His hand shot out. It was fast. He didn't grab my waist. He didn't grab my arm. He grabbed my wrist, the scarred one. His thumb immediately found the pale, ropey lines. What is this, some kind of... My blood ran cold. The air left my lungs. The smell of him, the heat of his hand, the way his thumb rubbed my skin. I was back in the clinic. I was back in the sanctuary. Let go! I choked out. Make me, little mouse, he leered, his grip tightening. She doesn't have to. The voice was not a shout. It was quiet. It was pleasant. It cut through the noise of the bay like a blade. Gustavo? He was standing 5 feet away, a vision in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo. He looked like he owned the boat, the harbor, the ocean itself. The man's face went from a leering red to a pasty, sickly white. Serrano, the man stammered, his hand still locked on me. Gustavo, I was just making your new staff feel welcome. I saw how you were welcoming her. Harrison, Gustavo said. He smiled. It was a bright, charming, terrifying smile that did not, under any circumstances, reach his eyes. You seemed to be holding on too tightly. Harrison's hand was still on my arm. He was frozen. Gustavo didn't lunge. He didn't hit him. He reached over to a stack of folded linens on a nearby cart. He picked up one, a square of starched white cloth. Allow me, Gustavo said. In one smooth, blurred motion, he wrapped the napkin around Harrison's wrist, over his hand that was still gripping my arm. He twisted the cloth, once, firmly. It wasn't a punch. It was a pressure lock, using the man's own grip against him. Harrison let out a sound like a stepped-on animal, a high, strangled gasp. His fingers spasmed open. His hold on me vanished. I scrambled back, gasping for air, rubbing my arm. Gustavo held the man pinned by the twisted napkin, his smile never wavering. That's better. Now, Mr. Harrison, you and I are going to go upstairs. He released the napkin. Harrison cradled his hand, his face slick with sweat and fear. But first, Gustavo said, his voice dropping to a cheerful whisper, you will apologize to the lady. I'm in Italian. Harrison, you're always bragging about your summers in Rome. Mi scusi, Harrison whimpered, looking at me. My apologies. Pathetic, Gustavo murmured, then louder. He steered the man by the elbow, out of the bay and up the stairs to the main deck. I followed, drawn by the unfolding horror. The party stopped. The string quartet went quiet. Gustavo, holding a red-faced Harrison by the arm, clinked a knife against a champagne flute. Friends, thank you, he called out, his voice projecting easily over the crowd. A small interruption. My good friend, Mr. Harrison, has just remembered his manners. He was practicing his Italian on my staff, and he wanted to share his apology with all of you. He shoved Harrison forward. The man looked at me, then at the silent, watching crowd, then at Gustavo's cold, smiling face. He mumbled the apology again, his voice cracking. Gustavo applauded lightly. Bravo now, a drink to new understandings. He snapped his fingers. A waiter appeared with a glass of dark brandy. Gustavo handed it to Harrison. A special vintage. My friend, you'll enjoy it. Harrison's hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He drank it in one go, gagging. Wonderful, Gustavo said. And now, I believe your tender is waiting. Thank you for coming. Harrison fled. He stumbled down the gangplank, a man publicly and professionally executed. The music swelled, and the party resumed instantly. I was shaking, from fear, from relief, and from a sudden, blinding rage. I stalked over to him. You used me, I hissed, my voice low and furious. I did, he said, turning, his face impassive. You put me there, knowing he would knowing someone would just so you could make a point. I made 2 points, he corrected, his voice equally low, for my ears only. The first to him that he is not allowed to touch what I am protecting. The second to everyone else that I am always watching. I am not what you are protecting. No, he agreed, looking past me at the dark, churning water. But they don't know that. He paused. Storms come and go. Aria, they're loud. They're messy. They pass. He turned his gaze back to me. You remain. He walked away, rejoining the party, a perfect host. I finished the flowers, my hands trembling. Later, I was on the deserted top deck, trying to breathe the cold, clean, salty air. The wind was sharp, whipping my hair across my face, tasting of the deep ocean. He was there, standing at the railing, alone, looking at the necklace of lights that was Gullhaven. I stopped, my hand on the doorway. I should have gone back down. But I didn't. I walked to the railing. I stopped a good 5 feet away from him, a safe distance. We stood in silence. The only sounds the wind and the low thrum of the yacht's engines. He turned his head. I turned mine. Our eyes met. It wasn't the assessing gaze of the kitchen. It wasn't the cold fury of the logistics bay. It wasn't the public, charming mask of the party. It was just a look. It held for 1 second, 2, 3, longer than polite, longer than professional. It was the longest 5 seconds of my life. A new line had been drawn, not a boundary of fear, but a perimeter. And we were both standing on it, caught in the cold, salty wind, staring at each other in the dark. That look on the yacht, it didn't fade. For 3 days, it hung in the air between us, a low-voltage current that made the atmosphere in the North Tower so thick I could barely breathe. The silence was louder than the party had been. I polished surfaces that were already gleaming. I scrubbed floors that were spotless. I was a ghost in his machine, and we were both waiting for the other to blink. That new tension made me careless, or maybe it just made me pay attention to the wrong things. I was vacuuming the heavy wool rug in the tessera room, the map room, using the big canister-style machine. It was usually whisper quiet, the kind of expensive appliance that cost more than my first year of college. But today, it was making a noise, a tiny, rhythmic clink, clink, clink. I stopped, annoyance flaring. I hated that sound. It was the sound of something broken, something out of place. I turned the machine off, knelt on the rug, and unlatched the heavy plastic dust compartment. It was empty, as usual. I checked the filter, and there it was. It wasn't a paperclip. It was a digital voice recorder, a tiny black sliver of plastic, no bigger than my thumb, wedged into the filter's housing. It was an impossible place for something to be unless it was put there. My blood went cold. The clinking was the sound of the plastic toggle switch hitting the housing. It had been knocked into the on position by the vibration. My fingers, numb and clumsy, fumbled for my headphones. I pulled them from my apron, plugged them into the device's tiny jack, and pressed play. The audio was muffled, thick with the sound of wind and distant machinery. 2 voices, both male, both with the rough, sand and gravel accent of the docks. Voice 1. Guarantee he'll show. Voice 2. He will if the bait is right. He's protective of the new girl, the one in the tower. Me. Voice 1. So the media angle is a bust. Voice 2. For now, Dane wants a direct meet. The trade is simple. Warehouse M12, Sable Harbor, midnight, the 19th. We get Solis. He gets the cargo route. The Voice 1. He's not just going to hand her over. Genie 2. He will. Or we expose the other thing, the sanctuary. He won't want that getting out. Just make the trade. Get Solis. The recording ended. I ripped the earbuds out, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Get Solis. I was a line item, a piece of merchandise to be traded in a warehouse. I didn't hide. I didn't run. I stood up. The tiny recorder gripped so hard in my hand the plastic edges dug into my palm. I left the vacuum in the middle of the floor and walked straight to Gustavo's private study. He was at his desk, staring at a laptop screen that was reflecting the gray, angry ocean. He looked up when I entered, his eyes cold. He didn't like being interrupted. I didn't speak. I just walked to his desk, my hand shaking, and dropped the recorder on top of his pristine leather blotter. "It was in the vacuum," I said. My voice was flat, dead. He looked at the recorder, then at me. He didn't use headphones. He just pressed play, his finger precise, and turned the volume on low. The tinny, awful voices filled the silent room. "Get Solis. He gets the cargo route." Gustavo's face, which I'd learned to read in micro-expressions, a tightening jaw, a narrowing of the eyes, went perfectly, absolutely blank. It was the most terrifying expression I'd ever seen. He was a statue of black marble. When the recording finished, he pressed stop. "Rurik Dane," he said. His voice was a flat, dead calm. "He runs the Cobalt Serpents." He gestured, not looking, toward the map in the other room, the cluster of blue pins. "He's been trying to force my hand for months. He thinks he can use you to draw me out. Warehouse M12 is his territory." "He called me Solis," I whispered, like a thing. "To him, you are," Gustavo said, his eyes drilling into me. "You are the leverage." "So what's the plan?" I asked, my voice gaining an angry edge. "Do you lock me in my room, post a guard, or do you make the trade?" "You will be secured," he said, rising from his chair. "You will not—" "No." He stopped. "No. That's what they're expecting. They're watching me. The text message, the men in the ash-gray ties, they're all his. Aren't they Rurik Dane's?" Gustavo just watched me, his head tilted. He was calculating. "They're watching me, waiting for me to be scared, waiting for you to lock me up," I said, the plan forming in my head, born of pure, distilled rage. "So let's give them something else. Let's send a message back." I reached into my apron and pulled out my old, cracked phone. Then I went to my cleaning cart in the hallway and dug my old camera bag from the bottom. I still carried it. Habit. I dropped the vintage camera on his desk next to the recorder. "They think I'm a weakness," I said, my heart hammering. "Let's make them think I'm a traitor." His eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The men in the gray ties, the fake MIC, they wanted me to be their witness. They wanted me to sell you out. So let's pretend I am." I held up the camera. "I text them. I tell them I've got proof. Photos of your ledgers, recordings, something big. I'll use a burner SIM card. I'll tell them to meet me. Tonight, at Warehouse M12. Absolutely not," he said. The words were final. "You are not a field operative. You are a civilian. I will handle Rurik Dane." "And how will you do that?" I shot back, emboldened by my own fear. "By starting a war, by getting that dock worker from the news killed. They're using me as a pawn. You told me not to starve because it was inefficient. Well, this is inefficient. Hiding, waiting, being bait." I leaned forward, my hands flat on his desk. "Let me be the trapper. Let them think they're catching a desperate girl trying to sell out her boss. They'll be overconfident. They'll be sloppy. And you—" I locked his gaze. "Will be waiting." He stared at me for a full minute. The silence stretched, filled only by the wind whistling against the glass. He was weighing the risk. He was weighing me. "This is not a game, Arya. You could be killed." "I'm already being hunted," I said. "I'd rather face it on my feet." He exhaled, a long, slow breath. It was a surrender. "Fine, but not alone." He pressed a button on his intercom. "Mira, my study, now." Less than 30 seconds later, the door opened. A woman I'd never seen before entered. She was my age, maybe late 20s, with dark hair pulled into a severe ponytail and the most alert, intelligent eyes I'd ever seen. She wore a simple black turtleneck and trousers. She didn't look like a bodyguard. She looked like an analyst. "This is Mira Cade," Gustavo said. "She's Vesper. She wrote your file." So this was her, the one who knew I'd lost 10 pounds. "Mira, you will accompany Miss Solis tonight," Gustavo ordered. "You are her cousin. You are both nervous. You are in over your heads. You will not be armed." Mira's eyes widened, the first break in her professional mask. "Sir, unarmed, in Dane's territory." "You will not appear to be armed," Gustavo corrected. He looked at me. Your plan, they will be sloppy. If they see professionals, the trap fails. They must see two terrified women. Mira's gaze snapped to me. It was cold, assessing. She was calculating my worth, my weak points, how fast I'd break. She will break, Mira said to Gustavo, as if I wasn't there. I won't, I said. Gustavo ignored us both. I will be in place. Your only job, Mira, is to keep her alive until I am... He tossed Mira a clean, black burner phone. Send the text. Warehouse M12, midnight. Tell them you have the Soulless girl, and she's ready to talk. Warehouse M12 was a cathedral of rust. It loomed at the end of a deserted pier, the wind off the black water making the corrugated metal walls scream and groan. It smelled of brine, diesel, and dead fish. Rain lashed down, turning the pier into a slick black mirror. You walk in first, Mira hissed, grabbing my arm. Her grip was like steel. You look scared. You clutch the camera bag. Don't look at me. I'm just your stupid cousin who you dragged into this. Got it. Got it, I whispered, my teeth chattering. It wasn't hard to act scared. I was paralyzed. Move. She shoved me toward the small side door. It was unlocked. We stepped inside. The warehouse was vast and cavernous, lit by a few sickly, buzzing yellow floodlights high above. It was empty, just rows and rows of rotting crates. Hello, I called out, my voice sounding small and thin. I'm here. I have the information. I clutched my old camera bag to my chest. Silence. This is stupid, Mira whispered, playing her part. Aria, let's go. This is a bad idea. And then it happened. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a light, a single blinding flash that exploded in my face, turning the world white. Flash, whir, click. There she is, get her, get her. My eyes, blinded by the magnesium flare, saw only spots, but I heard them, dozens of them, shouting, running. Flash, flash, flash. Not killers, reporters. They swarmed us, appearing from behind the crates, men and women in raincoats, shoving cameras and microphones in my face. Aria Solis, is it true you're Gustavo Serrano's mistress? Did he hire you to be a spy at Sal's diner? Are you selling him out tonight? What's in the bag? City Gaze wants to know, are you a gold digger, Aria? City Gaze, the filthiest tabloid in Gullhaven. This was the trap. Rurik Dane hadn't sent killers. He'd sent the press. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was a character assassination, a public execution. They wanted to drag my name and Gustavo's through the mud. Back off, Mira shouted, shoving a cameraman. She'd drawn a taser, its blue electrical light crackling in the dark. Back off, all of you. The flashes were relentless. I was trapped, blinded. I stumbled back, my heel catching on a rusted piece of rebar. I was going down. Clang, rattle, groan. A new sound, a sound from above, the massive, corrugated steel rolling door at the front of the warehouse. It was coming down, closing, trapping us in. And then, just as it was about to hit the ground, it stopped. It stopped with a loud, metallic thud. A man was in the doorway, the headlights and driving rain behind him creating a perfect, menacing silhouette. He was holding the door. He had his arm, his bare forearm, braced against the descending, multi-ton sheet of steel, holding it up with one arm. Gustavo. The reporters gasped. Spinning around, the flashes turned on him. Flash, flash, flash. But all they got was a shadow, a backlit silhouette of a man holding up a metal door. He stepped inside, letting the door crash down behind him. Clang. The warehouse was plunged into near darkness, the only light now the frantic, flashing strobes of the cameras. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked. He walked through the crowd of reporters like they were mist. They backed away, tripping over themselves. His face was a mask of cold, absolute fury. He reached me in 3 long strides. His hand shot out and gripped my upper arm, yanking me from the floor and pulling me behind his back, shielding me with his body. He faced the cameras, his back to them, his face in total shadow. He said nothing. The flashes were frantic, like a feeding frenzy, but they were getting nothing. Just the back of a man in an expensive coat, shielding a terrified girl. "Out," he said, his voice a low growl. Not to the reporters, to Mira. Mira grabbed my other arm, and together they formed a human wall, pushing through the crowd toward a small side exit I hadn't seen. We burst out into the rain. A black armored sedan was waiting, its engine idling. Mira threw open the back door. "Get in," Gustavo commanded. I tumbled in. He slid in beside me. Mira jumping into the front seat, the car peeled out, tires screaming on the wet pier before the reporters even made it out the door. We drove in silence. The only sound was the thwack, thwack, thwack of the windshield wipers and my own ragged breathing. I was shaking, soaked to the skin. He was perfectly still, staring out the window, his jaw so tight I thought his teeth might crack. His phone buzzed, once. He pulled it from his pocket. The green glow illuminated his face. He read the text. "Rurik Dane," he said, his voice flat. He read it aloud. "She looked good in the light. Give solace back to her past. It's cleaner." I stared at him. Give solace back to her past. And then it hit me. A realization so cold it stopped my shaking. "My past," I whispered. "He doesn't mean your past. He means mine." My mind flew back to the recorder. Or we expose the other thing, the sanctuary. "The Sanctuary of New Dawn," I said, the name tasting like ash. Rurik Dane. He's connected to them. They're not just a cult. They're trying to get me back. They're demanding their property be returned. Gustavo said nothing. He just stared at the rain-streaked city lights. When we got back to the North Tower, I was still damp, my adrenaline fading, leaving a bone-deep chill. He followed me into the suite. "You will not leave this house," he said. His back was to me. He was staring out the massive window at the dark ocean. "What?" "You will not leave this wing," he continued, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Mira will be stationed outside your door. You are confined here until I have dealt with Rurik Dane. You are grounded." Grounded? The word snapped. Like a child, like a prisoner, like a thing. All the fear, all the shame, all the running, it all coalesced into a single, hard point of rage. "Grounded," I repeated, my voice low and shaking, like a pet, like a piece of furniture, like the merchandise. He turned, his face a storm. "I'm keeping you safe." "No," I shouted, the sound shocking me. "You are keeping me caged. I ran away from the sanctuary to be free. I am not trading one master for another." I stalked toward him, my finger jabbing the air. "I am not a pawn on your map. Gustavo, I am not a solace to be traded in a warehouse. I am not a doll to be hidden away when she's broken. I am not property." We were inches apart. His chest was heaving. He was furious, baffled by my defiance. I was terrified, but for the first time in my life, I was more angry than I was afraid. "You will do as I say," he growled. No, I couldn't breathe the same air as him. I turned my back on him. I saw my camera bag, which I'd clutched through the entire ordeal, sitting on the floor. I grabbed it and walked toward the door to my own bedroom, my private space within the suite. He didn't stop me. I slammed the door, my back hitting the wood. I slid down, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I looked at the old, battered camera in my lap. I hadn't even taken a picture. The entire trip was a failure. But the lens cap, it was off. In the chaos, it must have been knocked off. And the little red light, it was blinking. It had been recording video the entire time. My fingers trembled as I rewound the footage. It was blackness, the inside of the bag, then the chaotic, blinding flashes of the warehouse, a mess of light and noise. Then, the end, the last 30 seconds. It was shaky footage, aimed at the floor, then it angled up. It was the footage from my walk away from him, just now, in the living room. I saw the back of my own head, walking away. And I saw him, Gustavo, standing alone in the middle of the room. His hand, it was reached out just an inch. his fingers slightly curled. He'd held it there for a split second after I'd turned my back, a ghost of a movement, an instinctive, aborted gesture to tell me to stop, to pull me back. But he hadn't. I watched the image freeze on my screen, his hand suspended in the empty air, caught in its own hesitation. The silence in the North Tower was a weapon. After our fight, after I'd slammed my door and he'd let me, we existed in a cold, pressurized truce. Mira Cade was outside my door. As promised, she didn't speak. She just was a silent, professional shadow. But Gustavo hadn't confined me to my bedroom. He had confined me to the suite. It was a subtle distinction, but it meant I was still expected to work. So I worked, I scrubbed, I polished, I vacuumed, I moved through the vast, empty rooms like a prisoner pacing her cell, while he stayed locked in his study. We hadn't seen each other in 36 hours. The only proof of his existence was the occasional, quiet click of his study door opening and closing late at night, and a fresh pot of coffee in the kitchen before dawn. The video I'd taken that image of his hand, reaching and then stopping, I replayed it in my mind until it was worn thin. His words said, grounded. His hand said, stop. On the second day, the storm that had lashed the warehouse broke over Gullhaven with full, screaming force. The wind howled, a physical, angry thing. The rain didn't fall. It attacked the floor-to-ceiling windows in horizontal sheets. The whole tower, perched on its cliff, seemed to groan. I ran out of fresh linens for the bathroom. The main supply closet was downstairs. In the staff sub-level, I'd have to take the private elevator. I paused at the elevator door. Mira, standing 10 feet away, watched me, her face impassive. This was the test. Was I allowed to leave the floor? I pressed the button. The steel doors slid open with a whisper. I stepped in. Mira didn't move. The doors slid shut. I was free of her, at least. The elevator was a small, polished box of dark wood and brushed steel. It descended smoothly. I watched the numbers light up PLS1. Flicker. The lights in the panel went dead. The entire box went black. Then came the sound, a sound I will never forget. The high, metallic scream of a cable snapping, followed by a stomach-dropping lurch. Thud! The elevator didn't fall far, maybe 10 feet, but it stopped with a bone-jarring final impact that threw me to my knees. I tasted copper. I'd bitten my tongue. Total darkness, total silence, except for the muffled shriek of the wind outside the building. Hello? My voice was thin, stolen by the heavy air. I scrambled to my feet, my hands finding the cold steel wall. I jammed the alarm button. Nothing. I grabbed the emergency phone. The line was dead. The air in the small box was already thick, stale. I could smell something. Ozone. The faint, sharp scent of burning electronics from the fried control panel. And a new smell, hot metal. I backed into the corner, sliding down the wall, my knees drawn up to my chest. Hot metal. I wasn't in an elevator. I was 19. I was in the sanctuary of New Dawn. I was in the punishment closet, a 5x5 box. No light, no air, and the only way out was a heavy steel door with a round, metal knob. A knob they heated from the other side until it glowed red. I could smell it. I could feel the heat. I could feel the panic, the animal terror of being cooked alive in a box. My breathing turned to shallow, painful gasps. The walls weren't walls. They were a coffin. I was buried. I don't know how long I was in there. A minute, an hour. Then, a new sound. From above, screech. The sound of metal on metal, a prying aria. His voice, not a shout, a command. It was muffled, coming from the shaft. Stand back from the door. I was already as far back as I could get. A hydraulic whine, the snap of a locking mechanism breaking, and then a horrible, groaning tear as the inner door was forced. A sliver of light appeared, emergency light, a dull, weak yellow from the hallway. The doors were pried open, not all the way, just 2 feet. They were jammed, buckled by the impact. Gustavo was in the gap. He was on one knee on the hallway floor, looking down at me in the dark pit of the elevator. He was in his shirt sleeves, his hair soaked from the rain, his jacket gone. He had a crowbar in one hand. He saw me. He saw the state I was in, curled into a ball, shaking, hyperventilating. I expected him to reach, to grab me, to haul me out like cargo. He didn't. He dropped the crowbar. It clattered on the marble floor. He stayed on one knee, keeping himself lower than me. He didn't invade my space. He remembered the pact. He took off his suit jacket, which he must have grabbed on the way. He didn't toss it. He held it out, one-handed, into the dark space. "Aria," he said, his voice low, steady. "The power is out in the whole tower. The system is dead. You are safe." I stared at the jacket. It was an offering. It was a choice. You lead, I'll follow. My hands, slick with cold sweat, trembled as I reached out. I didn't take the jacket. I grabbed the lapel. I grabbed him. My fingers twisted in the expensive wool, my knuckles white. It was my anchor. He didn't pull. He waited. I used his arm, his strength, to climb out. I scrambled out of the blackness, my knees hitting the marble, and collapsed in the dim hallway, still clutching his jacket. I was on all fours, gasping, the smell of ozone and hot metal still in my lungs. "You're out," he said. He didn't touch me. He just sat back on his heels, on one knee, giving me all the space in the world. The yellow emergency lights cast long, strange shadows. "Why were you so afraid?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost gentle. "It wasn't the fall. It wasn't the dark. I saw your face when the doors opened. The smell," I choked out, my voice raw. "The electronics. It smelled like hot metal." He waited. He knew there was more. "At the sanctuary," I whispered, the secret spilling out. "When we broke a rule, a minor rule, they put us in the box, a maintenance closet, no light." I was shaking again, the memory pulling me back. The knob, the doorknob, they would heat it from the outside. With a torch, you could smell it. You had to wait until it cooled to try and get out. Sometimes it took hours. You'd burn your hands again and again. I stopped, unable to say more. Gustavo's face was stone. The muscle in his jaw jumped, a single, violent twitch. He didn't offer pity. He didn't say, "That's terrible." He simply reached up, his fingers brushing his own collarbone, just above the line of his white shirt. "I have a scar here," he said, his voice flat, "from a knife." I stared at him, confused by the sudden confession. It wasn't from an enemy. It was from a brother, one who isn't one anymore. He met my gaze, and in his eyes, I saw it, a shared, cold understanding of betrayal. He understood the kind of wound that isn't just on the skin, the kind that's given by someone who was supposed to be safe. We just stayed there, kneeling in the half-darkness. The storm raged outside, a distant, howling beast in the hallway. There was only the sound of our breathing. His, controlled, mine, ragged. I looked at him, the man who had grounded me, the man who had held open a ton of metal door, the man who had just respected a boundary when I was at my most vulnerable. My hand was still fisted in his jacket. I let it go. "Your heart," I whispered. "What?" "It's racing." I could hear it, or maybe I could feel the vibration of it through the floor. I needed to know. I needed to know if the man with the cold, controlled fury and the man with the hesitant hand were the same. Slowly, I lifted my hand, the one with the pale, thin scars. He watched it. He didn't move, but his eyes, they were locked on my hand. I was aiming for his chest. I was an inch away when he spoke, his voice a low rasp. I asked. My hand stopped. "It was the pact," I asked. "You nod." He was asking. With his eyes, with his entire tensed body. "May I?" My throat was too thick to speak. So I nodded. A single, tiny, deliberate dip of my chin. I nod. He didn't move. He was giving me the power. It wasn't his move. It was mine. I completed the gesture. I pressed my palm flat against his chest, over his heart. Thump, 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 thump. It was a hammer. He wasn't made of marble. He was real. He was alive. And he was just as affected as I was. My touch was clinical, a test, but it wasn't. It was a question. He exhaled, a breath he'd been holding. He leaned in, just a fraction. His lips brushed mine. It was the lightest touch, a ghost. It wasn't a kiss. It was a query. It was the taste of rain and the clean, ozone scent of him. I didn't pull back. I held my breath. He pulled back, just a millimeter. His dark eyes searched mine in the yellow gloom. He was waiting. So I leaned in. I closed the distance. This time, it was real. It was still slow, still hesitant, but it was a kiss. It was salt and warmth and the static electricity of the storm. And then it deepened. His hand, which had been on his knee, moved. He didn't grab me. He didn't pull me closer. He placed it, palm flat, on the small of my back. Not a grip, not pressure, an anchor. A point of contact that said I am here. His other hand came up, his fingers sliding into my damp hair, cupping the back of my head, supporting me. "You lead, Aria," he whispered against my mouth. "I'll follow." He was giving me the control. He was giving me everything. And so I did. I kissed him back. I let go of the fear. I let go of the anger, the confinement, the cold, silent war. All the tension that had been holding my spine rigid for 5 years. The constant, low-level flight or fight, it just evaporated. My shoulders dropped. I exhaled into his mouth. I wasn't fighting. I wasn't running. I was, for the first time, still. His jacket, which I was still half kneeling on, slipped. It fell from his shoulders, pooling on the floor around us. A dark curtain in the golden emergency light. My hands, which had been braced on the floor, moved. One stayed on his heart. The other came up to his jaw, my fingers tracing the sharp, tense line. He turned his head into my touch, his eyes closed. There was no desperation. There was no fury. It was just a surrender. A quiet, profound, and absolute surrender. Click! We're babe! The main power kicked back on. The dim, warm emergency lights were extinguished, replaced by the harsh, bright white of the main hallway fluorescence. The elevator, with a metallic groan, suddenly stabilized itself, its internal lights flashing on. We broke apart, not fast, slowly, dazed. We were kneeling in the hallway, in a puddle of water from his rain-soaked clothes. His suit jacket puddled on the floor. He stood first, in one fluid motion. He didn't pull me up. He held out his hand. I took it. His grip was warm, solid. He did lift me then, effortlessly, but the moment my feet were stable on the floor, he let go. He didn't hold on. He didn't crowd me. He stepped back, giving me my space. He respected the pact, even now. I saw Mira Kate at the end of the hall, her hand on her hip, an unreadable expression on her face. A security guard was running toward us, alerted by the elevator alarm. Gustavo turned. I turned. We looked at each other. And a sound bubbled up in my chest. It was so foreign. I almost choked on it. A laugh. It was small, a quiet, breathless puff of air. And he smiled. Not the shadow of a smile, not the cold, shark-like grin, a real, small, tired smile. His eyes crinkled at the corners. The guard skidded to a halt. "Mr. Serrano, sir. Are you all right, is she?" I turned to the guard, and for the first time in my life, I looked a man in uniform directly in the eye. I didn't flinch. I didn't drop my gaze. I didn't hunch my shoulders. "We're fine," I said. My voice was clear. Gustavo looked at me, his smile fading into something else, something like approval. He picked up his jacket, shaking the water from it. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice rough from the kiss, but firm. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow I am taking you out of Gullhaven for a day, somewhere the air is clean." He turned and walked toward his study, not waiting for my answer. I turned and walked back to my suite. At the end of the hall, unnoticed by all of us, a small red light on a Vesper security camera glowed. It had captured the entire scene. The frantic guard, Mira's frozen posture, And the final look that passed between me and Gustavo, the look of two people who hadn't touched, but who, in the aftermath, looked like they already belonged to each other. He was waiting for me in the underground garage, the part of Black Reef House that smelled like cold concrete and motor oil. The armored sedan was gone. In its place was a car that looked like it had been sculpted from a block of the midnight sky. It was a 1960 Plymouth Fury, long low, with tail fins that looked sharp enough to cut. The color was a deep, oceanic blue, the chrome gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a collector's piece. "No Mira?" I asked, looking around the empty garage. "No Mira," Gustavo said. He was wearing jeans, and a gray Henley, with a worn, dark leather jacket. He looked normal, human. It was almost as disorienting as the suit. He tossed me a pair of sunglasses. "Just us. Get in." The engine didn't roar, it rumbled, a deep, satisfying vibration that I felt in my chest. We drove out of the concrete tunnel, leaving the oppressive black stone of the house behind, and merged onto the coastal highway. Gullhaven fell away, replaced by salt marshes, wide gray skies, and the clean, sharp smell of low tide. We drove for nearly 2 hours, the windows down. The wind was cold, whipping my hair into knots, but it felt good. It felt like it was scouring the elevator, the warehouse, the sanctuary, right out of my lungs. We didn't talk. We just listened to the thrum of the big engine and the rush of the sea. He drove us to Brimstone Cove. It was exactly the kind of town I'd forgotten existed. A handful of clapboard houses painted faded blues and yellows, a single main street, a tackle shop, and a forest of fishing boat masts in the tiny harbor. Nobody knew us here. We weren't the boss and the maid. We were just two people in an old car. "I'm hungry," I said. It was the first time I'd said it without shame. He parked in front of a place called Salt and Smoke. The sign was a faded painting of a codfish smoking a pipe. The inside smelled incredible, like hickory wood smoke, hot fried batter, and old, slightly burned coffee. A jukebox in the corner was playing a crackly, soulful song by a band I didn't recognize. We slid into a red vinyl booth that was cracked like my old phone screen. A waitress with a tired, kind face dropped 2 menus. "Specials are the fish cakes," she said, not looking up. "They're fresh." We ordered fish cakes, French fries, coleslaw, 2 root beers, and a small bowl of saltwater toffee from the glass jar on the counter, just because it was there. When the food came, it was hot, real, and served on thick, heavy plates. I ate slowly, in the sanctuary. You ate fast, head down, before someone could decide you didn't deserve it. It was a hard habit to break. Gustavo took a bite, then another. I watched him. He was eating like he was on a timer, efficient. He finished 3 fries before I'd finished my first one, and he looked at my plate, still mostly full. He looked at his half empty. He looked at me. Really looked at me, chewing. He deliberately put his fork down. He waited for me to take another bite. He watched me chew, then, only then, he picked up his fork and took his next bite, at my pace. It was the most intimate thing he'd ever done, more than the kiss in the elevator. "Rurik Dane," I said, my voice low, just above the jukebox. "The sanctuary. How are they connected?" He leaned back, the vinyl squeaking. Money! The sanctuary needed protection, and a way to launder its donations. Dane needed a clean organization to move sensitive things. Cults are good for that. No one questions their shipping manifests. So they're partners. They are. I pushed a piece of fried fish around my plate. The jukebox clicked, and a new, sadder song started. Her name was Nova. I said. Gustavo stopped eating. His fork hovered over his plate. He just listened. She was my roommate at the sanctuary. She was bright. She always said the sky wasn't real there, that it was just a blue curtain they hadn't pulled back yet. The memory was sharp, tasting like mud and adrenaline. She was the one who found the way out. Oh, it was a truck, delivering cotton or something for the workshops. We were supposed to be cleaning the loading bay. It was maybe 3 a.m, raining, just like the other night. We climbed in the back, I whispered, staring at the salt shaker. We burrowed down in the bales. It was dark. We were terrified, but we were out. And then, my voice broke. I hated it. The truck stopped. Not even 5 minutes later, one of the guardians, he must have seen us. He pulled back the tarp. He had a flashlight. He grabbed her ankle. I could still hear her scream. He started pulling her out. She was fighting. She kicked me, hard, on purpose. "Jump, Bar," she screamed. "Jump, Aria, run." So I did. I scrambled out the other side, into the mud. I ran. I never looked back. I heard the truck drive away, with her. I looked up at Gustavo. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. They caught her, and I survived because I jumped into a truck full of cotton. I survived because she told me to. He didn't offer pity. He didn't say I'm sorry. He offered action. This Nova, she's the leverage. I don't know, this was 5 years ago. Gustavo, she could be... No, he said, his voice firm. They're using her name. Rurik Dane's text. Give solace back to her past. Nova is your past. They're trying to bait you with her. He paid the bill in cash, leaving a tip so large the waitress stared at him. We didn't get back in the car. We walked. We walked past the tackle shop, past the pier, and onto the beach. It was deserted, just a long, curving strip of gray sand and wind-blasted dunes. The tide was out, the ocean a flat, metallic sheet under the gray sky. The wind was cold, sharp. I pulled his old coat, the one he'd given me in the kitchen, which I'd grabbed on the way out, tighter. My breathing was still too shallow. The memory of Nova's scream stuck in my throat. Gustavo stopped at the water's edge. The waves were small, lapping quietly at the sand. Foam, retreat, foam, retreat. "You're panicking," he said, not looking at me. "I'm fine." "You're breathing from your chest. You're holding your shoulders too high. You're still in that truck." He turned to face the ocean. "Watch the water. Breathe with that. In, when the wave comes up the sand." He breathed in, slow and deep. Out, when it pulls back. He exhaled. I watched him. His shoulders rose and fell. I tried it. In 2-3 as the foam hissed. Out 2-3 as it receded. We stood there for 5 minutes. Just breathing. The knot in my chest, the one that had been there for 5 years, slowly began to unwind. "Better?" he asked. "Better." I pulled out my old camera, the real one from my bag. "Your turn." He looked at me, confused. "You look at people," I said, "like you're inventorying them, like they're problems to be solved, or threats to be neutralized. It's efficient. It's not for a portrait." I held the camera up. "You want to know the truth about someone, you don't look at their hands or their suit. You look at their eyes, but you have to let them see yours, too." I focused the lens. Don't pose. Just be here, on this beach. Breathe the wave." He looked at the camera, his shoulders, which I just realized were as tense as mine, relaxed by a fraction. The cold, assessing mask dropped. For a second, I didn't see the boss. I saw Gustavo, the man who learned to eat slow. Click! He had an old Polaroid camera in the glove compartment of the Fury, a toy, he called it. While he started the drive back, I took a picture of us, a bad, blurry, wind-blown shot, my hair a mess, his eyes on the road. I turned the square photo over. I pulled a pen from my bag. I wrote 4 words on the back. "Nobody is property." I handed it to him. He read it, glanced at me, and slid it into the pocket of his leather jacket. We drove back in silence, the big engine a low growl. He drove faster this time. He got on his phone, the modern device looking alien in the vintage car. "Mira," he said, his voice all business again, "I want the sanctuary of New Dawn's financials. All of them, tax filings, donor lists, shell corporations. I want to know where every dollar comes from and where every dollar goes. Hit the money. The leader, the prophet. He'll show his face." He hung up. Just as his phone was about to go dark, it rang again. He looked at the screen, his entire body tensed. It wasn't Mira. "Serrano," he answered. He listened. I watched his knuckles go white as he gripped the steering wheel. When? He growled. He listened again. How much? He stared at the road, but I knew he was seeing me. Understood. He hung up. That was my contact at Atlantic Crown Bank, he said, his voice deadly calm. And Vesper set up a dozen tracker accounts after the warehouse incident, alias accounts monitoring for any activity linked to you or the sanctuary. And one of them just got hit, an account under the name Nova Hale. It was emptied, all $5,000, exactly 10 minutes ago, from an ATM in Gullhaven. I stopped breathing. Nova Hale. That was her full name. I know, he said. Rurik Dane and the Sanctuary aren't just partners anymore. They're making a move. They're not trying to bait me. They're trying to pull you out of my protection. And they're using your friend as the lure. The road trip was over. We didn't go to Black Reef House. He took the exit for Kestrel Heights. What are we doing? I asked, my stomach twisting. The MIC, the fake ones. If they're working with Dane, and Dane is making a move, they'll be sloppy, he said. He parked the Fury 3 blocks away, in the shadow of a derelict brewery. They'll be looking for you, for leverage. He meant my old apartment, my room. Mira Cade was waiting by the tenement's rusted fire escape, melting into the shadows. She just nodded at Gustavo. And they're in there, she whispered. Thorne and the young one. Been inside for 10 minutes. The lock was cheap. My photographs, I whispered. My old camera bag suddenly feeling heavy. My negatives, my proof. Let them look, Gustavo said. He looked at Mira. Get her door open, silently. We leave it as we found it. We need to know what they're looking for. Mira nodded. She pulled a small, flat metal kit from her pocket. In less than 10 seconds. She had the flimsy lock on the tenement's front door picked. We slipped inside, the hallway smelling of damp and old garbage. We stopped at my apartment door. I could hear them, muffled, the sound of my drawers being pulled open, my mattress being flipped. I felt violated. Mira put her ear to the door. They're in the main room. She looked at the lock. It was a standard, cheap deadbolt. She inserted her tools. There was a single, soft snick. She'd unlocked it. She looked at Gustavo. He held up a hand, waiting. They're done, she whispered. They're coming. We didn't run. We just stepped back into the dark alcove under the stairs. The door opened. Thorne and the young, smug agent stepped out. Nothing, Thorne grunted, sounding angry. Just clothes and a bunch of artsy photos of Rust. She's got nothing here. Dane was sure she'd have something. The young one said, a bug, a ledger. Serrano's a fool for her. He's not a fool. Let's go. We'll grab her off the street if we have to. They walked down the hall and out the front door, their footsteps echoing. We waited a full minute. Then Gustavo pushed me, gently, toward my room. Mira was already inside, her penlight scanning. They'd torn it apart. My clothes were on the floor. My mattress was sideways. Don't touch anything, Gustavo ordered. Mira was kneeling by my bedside table. They were thorough. They checked the outlets for bugs, split the lining of her bag. She looked up, her face grim. They relocked the door on their way out, the way they picked it. They wanted it to look untouched. A trap, I said, looking at the mess. A reverse trap, Gustavo said. He was staring at the wall, at my old, peeling mirror. They wanted to see if you'd come back, and what you'd go for first. I felt exhausted. I was a puppet, and everyone Rurik Dane, the Sanctuary, the fake MIC, and maybe even Gustavo was pulling a string. I can't do this, I whispered, sliding down the wall. I'm not like you. I'm not a strategist. I'm just the bait. Gustavo knelt in front of me, just like in the elevator. He didn't touch me. Look at me, Arya. I lifted my head. His eyes, in the dim light of my ruined room, were dark and serious. That night at the warehouse, you weren't bait. You were the trapper. You came up with the plan. It was a good one. You were just outgunned. He glanced around the room at the violation. I'm not Rurik Dane, he said, his voice low and intense. I'm not the sanctuary. They see you as something to be owned, to be marked, to be used. He took a breath. I don't want to own you, Arya. He paused, the silence heavy. I want the responsibility for you. I don't want to own you. I want the responsibility for you. That sentence hung in the air of my ruined room, heavier than the smell of mildew and dust. Responsibility. It wasn't the word of a boss. It was the word of a partner, or a guardian. I wasn't sure which was more dangerous. We were back in the North Tower study, the sky outside a bruised purple. The maritime map was behind me, the blue pins of the cobalt serpent seeming to glow in the twilight. Mira Cade stood by the door, silent. So, they know I'll come back for my things, I said, my voice hard. They're watching my old room. They're watching the ATM where Nova Hale's money was taken. They're hunting me in the shadows. I'll move you, Gustavo said, his voice flat. A new house, out of state. Vesper can have you on a plane in an hour. No. I shook my head, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. No, you don't get it. They want me in the shadows. That's where they're strong. That's where Rurik Dane and Halden Price operate. They want me to run. They want me to hide. I walked to the center of the room. I felt cold, calm. The fear had burned away, leaving something hard and sharp. They want me to be a victim, so I'll stop being one. Gustavo watched me, his expression unreadable. The fake MIC, I said, Thorn. He wanted me to be a witness. He wanted me to sell you out. Let's give him exactly what he wants. Arya, that trap failed, Gustavo said, his patience thin. It failed because it was their trap. Now we set ours. I looked at him. My plan forming, clear and terrible. We'll use your own tactic against them, the spotlight. We'll hold a hearing, a citizen's inquiry into dockside corruption. We'll leak it to City Gaze, to everyone. We'll rent a public space, Civic Hall Westgate. You want to walk into a public room full of reporters, Mira finally spoke, her voice laced with disbelief. Yes, I'll be the star witness, the scared, wronged maid, turning on her powerful, dangerous boss to save herself. I'll be exactly the stereotype they expect. Halden Price will never let that happen, Gustavo said, seeing my logic. Exactly, I countered. He's a prophet, a man of absolute ego. He will not let me, his escaped property, stand in a spotlight and tell my story. He'll come. He'll come to discredit me, to prove I'm a liar, and Rurik Dane will come to silence me, probably by grabbing me the moment I'm exposed. We get them both, in the light, on our terms. Gustavo was silent for a full minute. He looked at the map, then at me. The room will be controlled, he said. It was an agreement. The audience, the Obsidian Circle, isn't just men with guns. Arya, it's a network. Loyalty. The mothers from Fisher's Row, the families I've supported through the Lapis Fund, they will be the audience. He'll be walking into my house. Civic Hall Westgate was a decaying monument to a better time. All damp marble and echoing corridors. The air smelled of old floor polish and rain. The hearing room was on the second floor, a small auditorium with worn wooden benches and a flimsy folding table on a low stage. A single, buzzing microphone waited. I felt exposed. I was wearing a plain gray sweater and jeans, the most non-threatening clothes I owned. I had Gustavo's wool coat clutched around me, my shield. Mira, dressed in a cheap suit, looked like a nervous public defender. She sat next to me. But the audience, it was exactly as Gustavo had promised. It wasn't suits. It was women with tired eyes, holding shopping bags. It was old men in worn-out dockworkers' jackets. The people from Fisher's Row. They filled the benches, a silent, watchful sea. They weren't here for the show. They were a human wall. Investigator Thorne, the fake MIC man, was at a lectern, looking important and official. He nodded to the City Gaze reporters in the front row. "We call our first witness," he said, his voice booming artificially. "Arya Solis." I walked to the microphone. My hands were shaking. I clutched my prepared notes. I I started working at Black Reef House about 6 weeks ago. I began, my voice trembling, playing the part. I saw irregularities. She's lying. The voice cut through the room. It was not a shout. It was warm, paternal, rich, like honey. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I knew that voice. Halden Price stood at the back of the room. It was exactly as I remembered. Silver hair, a face that was handsome and kind, and eyes as dead and cold as a frozen lake. He wore a beautiful, expensive suit, the Prophet. My scars didn't just itch, they burned. "This poor girl is deeply troubled," Price said, walking down the aisle. His entourage, all clean-cut young men, followed. "She's not a witness. She's a fugitive from our care." Thorne, playing his part, looked shocked. "Sir, who are you?" "I am Halden Price, director of the Sanctuary of New Dawn. And this young woman, she is a thief." "That's a lie." I gripped the microphone, my knuckles white. "Is it?" Price smiled. That kind, awful smile. "Or is this—" He signaled. A projector on a cart flickered to life, throwing an image onto a pull-down screen. It was me, blurry, black and white. It was security footage from Sal's Diner, my old job. The timestamp was from the night before it was shut down. The footage showed me, my back to the camera, opening the small office safe. I stuffed something cash into my apron. The crowd murmured. The City Gaze reporters were snapping photos, their faces lit with predatory glee. "As you can see," Price said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "She was dismissed for theft. She came to Mr. Serrano out of desperation, not integrity. It was a brilliant move. He'd painted me as an unstable, criminal source. My testimony was dead." But a new voice crackled over the PA system, a calm, technical voice I didn't recognize. "The audio, Mr. Price." Price faltered. "What?" "Run the audio signature on the video." The tech's voice said, "Gustavo's man." He was patched in from a van outside. A sound wave graph appeared on the screen, overlaying the video of me. When the ambient noise floor, the hum of the cooler, the street noise, it's a perfect loop. The tech explained, "It repeats every 34.5 seconds. You can see the splice point right there." A red line appeared. "That's not surveillance footage. That's a fabrication, a sloppy one." Price's smile vanished. Thorne looked at Price, his face pale. The reporters stopped snapping and started scribbling, their heads down. The narrative had just shattered. Price looked at Thorne. Thorne looked at the main exit. It was Rurik Dane's move. And then the world ended. Clunk. The lights died, the projector died, the PA system died. Absolute darkness. The red, glowing exit signs at the back were the only light. Someone in the crowd screamed, "Fire!" It was one of Price's men. The trap sprung. It wasn't an assassination. It was a stampede, a riot. They wanted chaos, a way for Price to escape and for Dane's men to grab me in the panic. The reporters and Price's men surged toward the exits. I was shoved backward, knocked off the low stage. I hit the marble floor, hard, boots. People were screaming, scrambling over the benches. I was going to be trampled. A hand grabbed my arm, not pulling, lifting. Gustavo. He had been in the front row, disguised in a baseball cap, sitting with the mothers from Fisher's Row. In one explosive movement, he lifted me from the floor as if I weighed nothing and placed me on top of the heavy, solid oak table. "Stay up," he commanded. Mira Cade was suddenly beside him. She had a heavy, black flashlight, using it to clear a space. "This way, sir, they're blocking the main exit." I tried to get my footing on the polished wood. I was shaking. A panicking reporter grabbed my leg to try and climb up with me. I slipped. My hand flailed, and I grabbed the microphone stand, the heavy wool coat, my armor, slid off my shoulders. It pooled at my waist. The beam from Mira's flashlight, sweeping the crowd, hit me. My arm, my left arm, bare to the elbow, the scars on my wrist, the pale, precise deletion marks, were caught in the bright, harsh beam. The panic had just stopped. The woman who had screamed, the reporter who had grabbed me, The men fighting at the door. They all froze. A single camera flash went off, a brilliant white explosion that illuminated the scars for everyone to see. Silence, heavy, thick, suffocating. My first burning instinct was to cover myself, to yank the coat up, to hide. I saw Halden Price, standing near the exit, his face a mask of pure fury, not that I'd escaped, but that his work had been exposed. I looked at his face. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the camera. I dropped my hand from the microphone. I straightened my back. I held my chin high. I let them look. I felt Gustavo move beside me. He didn't cover me. He didn't pull me down. He took the battery-powered bullhorn from Mira's emergency bag. Look. His voice, amplified, was the sound of rolling thunder. It hit the crowd like a physical force. "You want a story! City gaze!" he shouted, his voice echoing in the marble hall. He didn't point at Price. He pointed at me, at my arm. "There is your story. Look at it. This is the sanctuary of Halden Price. This is the price of his care. This is the truth, not a doctored video. This." It was a masterstroke. The reporters, sensing a story 1,000 times bigger than dockside corruption, turned their cameras, not on me as a victim, on Price as the cause. Thorne, the fake MIC agent, saw the trap collapse. He bolted, shoving his way toward the main doors where Dane's men were waiting. Crash! The main doors burst inward, not outward, blinding white flashlights. "Mick Federal and Municipal, nobody move." Thorne froze, his hands in the air. We're the MIC." A woman in a crisp, dark suit, flanked by 2 armed agents, stepped into the light. "No, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice ice. "We are, and you're under arrest for impersonating a municipal officer, conspiracy, and racketeering." Gustavo had done it. He hadn't just packed the audience. He'd anonymously tipped off the real Municipal Integrity Commission, the one he knew was already sniffing around the docks. He'd used Thorne to catch Price, and used Price to catch Thorne. In the ensuing chaos, as the real agents cuffed Thorne's men, I scanned the room. Halden Price was gone. He had vanished. Gustavo grabbed my hand the first time he'd done so without the pact. "Now," he said. He pulled me off the table, through a side door marked Judge's Chambers, and into a dark, narrow stairwell. Mira was holding the door. We were in the sedan and halfway across the bridge before the sirens grew fainter. My adrenaline was gone, leaving me shaking. Mira, in the front seat, handed a phone back to Gustavo. Not his, a cheap, black burner. It was on the table, and she said, taped underneath where she was standing. Gustavo looked at it, one new text message. "Hallow Peak. Come alone. She'll be waiting." My stomach dissolved. "Hallow Peak," I whispered. "The old observatory. It's near the sanctuary. He means Nova," Gustavo finished, his voice grim. "She's alive," I breathed. "The bank account, she's alive. He has her." "It's a trap, Aria," Gustavo said, his eyes on the road. "He lost. This is his last, desperate move. He's baiting you. You are not going." "She screamed for me to run," I said, the words pulling from a place 5 years deep. "She was caught for me. He's had her all this time. I am not leaving her there. She's a ghost, Aria. He's using your past to trap you." "I don't care." I turned to him, the man who wanted responsibility. "I am going, with or without you. I am not running this time." "I forbid it," he growled. "I'm not your property to forbid." We stared at each other in the darkness of the car, the city lights sliding past us like tracers. The fight in the hall was over. The real war had just begun. The drive back to Black Reef House was a silent, vibrating war. His words, "I forbid it," hung in the air, cold and heavy as steel. My response, "I am not your property," was the shield I'd held up against them. We were at an impasse, a cliff edge, and Hallow Peak was the jagged rock waiting below. He didn't take me to the study or the tessera room. He took me to the library. It was a room I rarely cleaned, a room that smelled of old paper, leather, and wood smoke. A small, contained fire crackled in the hearth, throwing restless orange light on the spines of 1,000 books. It was a room meant for thinking, not fighting. But we were fighting. "It's a trap. Arya, that's all it is," he said, his voice low, controlled. He was standing by the fire, his back to me, staring into the flames. He's lost. The Civic Hall was a disaster for him. The real Mycie has Thorn. City Gaze has his face. He's cornered. He's using the only card he has left, a ghost. "She is not a ghost," I said, my voice shaking with a cold rage. "The bank account. He's kept her. All this time. He's been using her. And now he's using her to get to me. And he will get you." He turned, and his face was hard. The face of the man who ran the docks. "This isn't a negotiation, it's an execution. He'll put her on that peak. He'll demand you. You'll go. And he will eliminate you both. He can't let either of you live." "So what do?" I demanded. "We let him kill her because it's too dangerous, because I'm too valuable to you now." "We trade," he said, the words flat. "Trade with the financials, he knows I have them." "No, a person for a person." My blood ran cold. "What?" "My way, the way that works," he said, his voice ruthless. "We accept the terms. You go. He shows Nova. He lets her go. The moment she is clear, the second she is clear, Mira's team, which will be in place, takes the shot." I stared at him, horrified. "You wanted to snipe him while I'm standing there?" "It's the only way," he grated. "It ends the threat. It gets Nova out. It's clean." "That's not clean," I was shouting now, the sound swallowed by the thick books. That's a cold-blooded execution. That's what he would do. That's what Rurik Dane would do. You'd be trading my life for his, and hoping Nova gets out of the way in time. That's not a plan. That's a body swap." "It's efficient, Yarn," he shot back. "Your way. The one you're dreaming of, where you walk up there. Talk him down, and you both walk away holding hands while he just surrenders. That is a fairy tale. Arya. And it will get you both killed. And your way makes you him." I stepped toward him, jabbing a finger at his chest. "It makes you the monster everyone in Gullhaven already thinks you are. I will not be the excuse for an assassination. I am going there to get both of us out, or I'm not going at all." "You're going," he growled. "You're just going my way." "No." We were at a deadlock, standing inches apart, the firelight painting us in flickering, warring shadows. His anger was a physical thing, a dry heat radiating off him. But it wasn't the anger of a boss. It was the white-hot anger of fear. He was terrified. I saw it, under the muscle in his tense jaw, under the cold, flat obsidian of his eyes. He was terrified of losing me, and it was making him cruel. My own anger evaporated, leaving only a cold, sharp clarity. I didn't step back. I stepped in. I lifted my hand slowly. He flinched, almost imperceptibly, his body bracing for a hit, or perhaps for me to run. I didn't hit him. I didn't run. I placed my fingers gently on the side of his neck, right over the artery, the pulse point. Thump, thump, thump. It was a hammer, a frantic, trapped bird beating against the cage of his skin. His calm, controlled mask was a lie. He was just as panicked as I was. He closed his eyes. The tension in his shoulders didn't leave, but he stopped fighting. He just breathed. "I ask," he whispered, his voice a raw rasp. "The pact, even now." My throat was too tight to speak. I nodded, just once, a small, sharp dip of my chin. The moment I did, he moved. He didn't grab me. His hands didn't snatch. They found me. One hand on my waist, the other on my shoulder, turning me gently, guiding me away from the battlefield of the hearth. He guided me backward until my legs hit the soft, deep leather of the sofa. We sank into it together. The fire was at our side now, casting a warm, golden light over us. The shadows were gone. He leaned